Happy Halloween! Love Halloween. Not my favorite holiday, but it's pretty close. And today, because of it being Halloween, I want to dive into a subject that I feel like I am very qualified to talk about. And that is the correlation and direct involvement of paganism, witchcraft, and Christianity. Because the thing is they are not as separate as we believe. If you're new here, I'm Sarah, and I created this channel to give you everyday practical ways to understand yourself better, understand the world around you, bring more love and joy and peace and happiness into your life through self-mastery and spirituality. So I was raised Catholic. As I've talked about in other videos, I actually have some Christian videos on my page for when I used to identify that. I will link one here if you're interested in hearing about that journey. But as of, my spiritual awakening the last 5.5 years, I'm very open-minded. I dive into a lot of things. I believe in a lot of things that crisscross and that kind of flow in and out of each other. And within the last 1.5 years or so that I've been studying, witchcraft and utilizing it, I do have some videos on making spells and things like that. I will post that here. I feel like there's a lot of things that, especially as Christians, they don't tend to realize where a lot of this stuff comes from. So let's dive right in. So before it was called Halloween, the 31st, the Day of the Dead, all these things were known as Samhain, which was known as the final harvest before winter. And so it was believed that the veil, right, between the different worlds, the spiritual realm and the earthly realm that we live on, is the thinnest of at any point during the year, right? So because of that, it was believed that spirits of the dead could visit the living, and not in like a creepy, weird way, but more of a sacred one and a respected one. And so much like Christmas Eve, when people put out the candles to welcome Jesus in, families would put out different offerings to guide the spirit and their ancestors home. Like, how beautiful is that? And so people would dress up not to be scary, but to more so blend in with the different types of spirits that could come in. And that's how it has evolved to becoming into how it is today, where people dress up in costumes. And so originally, Halloween was and still is, for obviously paganism and witchcraft and everything like that, it was a spiritual celebration of life, of death, of the entire cycle of life and death. So for those who follow paganism and practice these things, Halloween is really considered the new year, a time of what most of us do on January 1st, right? Reflection and magic and communication with the realms that we as human beings can't see. And so because of all of this, a lot of people who practice paganism believe that this is when their intuition is the strongest, and this is when you can use tarot and pendulums and all of these things to connect with the spirit, and it comes in a lot clearer. If you want to learn a little bit about pendulums, I have an entire video on how to use them for beginners right here. And that's the thing, right? A lot of these practices, and the whole point of Samhain, wasn't supposed to be dark. They weren't supposed to be evil. And it was simply about balance, right? The balance and the natural cycle of life and death. And so the fires that were lit on top of hills, and the meals that were shared, and the magic that was practiced are all acts of honoring the transformation from life to death. And so that's kind of where this overlap of witchcraft and paganism and Christianity comes in, because both believe that there's no end to life, right? It's just a transformation into the spirit realm, into a different part of life. And so what happened is, when Christianity began spreading across Europe, a lot of the, what do you call them? Oh, missionaries you know, people spreading the word of God and all of these things, they would obviously come across a lot of people who practiced paganism and lived and worked and honored nature and worked with all those things. And so instead of erasing these festivals and celebrations, a lot of these missionaries merged them. And that was when Pope Gregory, I don't remember if it was the second, the third, I don't remember. But that was when Pope Gregory moved the All Saints Day to November 1st. And then the night before became Hallows Eve, which over time became Halloween. You know, the church understood that people weren't going to stop honoring their ancestors and celebrating this cycle of life and death. So what they did is they kind of merged it, and they didn't change the timing, but they kind of like relabeled it. Hold on. Hey babe. So basically it was the church saying like, fine, you know, you can keep your celebration and your fire and your festivals and all this stuff, but now it's going to be for the saints. Does that make sense? So here's like the really interesting part of all of this. Paganism and Christianity are pretty much always seen as like polar opposites, but there are a lot of core beliefs that are similar, if not exactly the same, right? Like, so think about it, like both traditions believe in and honor life after death. That's the big one, especially for today on Halloween. They both believe in light overcoming darkness, and along with that, faith in the unseen, right? Like, hello. And they also both believe in like ceremonies and rituals. They look a little different, but a lot of them do cross paths and are very similar and parallel. And so for me, someone who grew up a Christian and has now been exploring, you know, the pagan way of life, both, how do I put this? Both explore this like a divine mystery, I think is the best probably like way to put it. The fact that we are spiritual, eternal beings having a human and earthly experience. And think about this, right? And a lot of people, you know, especially Christians, because I didn't know this before I started exploring paganism, you know, the cross, right? The cross, I have one, right? I'm not gonna flick you guys off, but I have my cross, you know, right here. And the cross was around a long time before Jesus and Christianity. It was a symbol that represented the four directions and the four elements, and encompassing in that is the balance of life. And another example of this is the halo, right? On a lot of like Christian artwork, you see a glowing halo. Well, pagans believe that there is a glowing aura that surrounds people or beings of a higher vibration. And then to top it off, you have Jesus's resurrection, the death and the rebirth of Christ. What does that mirror? The pagan wheel of life, the cycle of everything dying and returning again. As I've explored all of this, you know, they really aren't that different. It almost feels like they're two kind of like different languages exploring the same core ideas. And so what happened was when Christianity became like more dominant in Europe, that was kind of when things started to get a little dark, and that was when the church started labeling witches and paganism as, you know, the devil's work or evil or demonic. Because if you think about it, witches were the ones who were the midwives. They were the medicine women. They were the spiritual healers. They were the ones working with nature, with herbs, with flowers, with seasons, with intuition. And these were things that the church didn't understand. And in my opinion, that the church didn't have control over. And so what happened was the word witch became demonic and evil and taboo. As we know from history and stuff, the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, was silenced, and obviously it was worse than that. They were burned, they were murdered, they were brutally killed. But here's the cool thing about it. Even through all of that, it survived and is still ever present today. And from my perspective, it is growing again. And I think that's so beautiful that we are coming back to intuition, and the divine feminine is rising again. And if you are interested to kind of like work a little more with your intuition, I have a full video here of the different practices that you can do and try and kind of test out that are pretty simple and fun. And what I hope is that more people like me, you know, with Christian backgrounds, start to understand that paganism isn't demonic, and they weren't erasing God and universe and source and all that is, but it is a way to actually connect with and speak to that source. And part of that is kind of why after all these years I have come to believe that that's all the same thing. God and source and divinity and the universe, it's all the same thing. They're just different labels that people use. Really cool about it is even in modern times with Halloween, like today, a lot of people think of Halloween as just costumes and candy and trick-or-treating, but from my perspective, it is still a day of the year where society kind of unconsciously altogether merges and reconnects with some of that ancient ritual, with magic and mystery and with the unseen. Think about it. If you're lighting jack-o'-lanterns, if you're doing simmer pot, we still sense that there is something special about tonight, about Halloween. And it's because it's an ancient memory that is very ingrained into our souls. So the way I see it is, without paganism, Christianity wouldn't exist. And without Christianity, paganism could have been completely removed off the map. So if you're Christian or another religion and you kind of have this ingrained version of witches and paganism and Halloween and all of these things, I just invite you to do a little bit of research, and as always, to just stay open-minded, to not make judgments, and to also understand that everything isn't for everyone. And just because, you know, take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. It doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing. You know, just because I don't identify as a Christian anymore doesn't mean that I don't carry things from that. It doesn't mean that I don't still talk to Jesus sometimes. You know, it's just figuring out what feels true and aligned and right for you. So I hope you guys found value in this video. I absolutely loved making it. It was actually my brother's idea, and I was like, it's so fun. I love it. And I hope that you guys have a really profound Halloween. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so we can hang on again next week. I love you guys so, so, so much. And don't forget, be limitlessly yourself.